want to talk a little bit about North Korea, or what is formerly known as the Democratic Republic of Korea. As a socialist, you have to confront yourself with just about every socialist country that there is in this world, and every socialist idea. And some socialist countries are more acceptable than others. And I think that's just the way it is. We either are going to accept everything, which I don't think is a good idea, or we're going to look at things critically, which I think is a good idea. I have to look critically at China and say, well, I'm not really happy with what they're doing with their Muslim people in the northeastern part of this country. But overall, I think China's way of growth is a way that we can look upon as a way of growth under socialism. And I can say the same thing about Vietnam and Laos to some extent. I really can't say it about Cuba, but Cuba is under special circumstances. They've been under a embargo for over 50 years. Hell, no one's going to survive that without a few bruises. But overall, Cuba does work to help feed its people. It works to educate its people, and it works to give its people medicine. It has a much better medical field, medical way of doing things than even the United States. Given and doing that with a lot less resources than the United States has. What's going on here? I have a door that's open. So we have to look at ourselves when we look at North Korea. North Korea, here's this singular state, that still stands under a pseudo-Stalinist idea that is untenable. And it was untenable under Stalin to an extent. Stalin was a leader that was under an idea of praise, almost godship to it. A way of looking at Stalin was to look at the greatest leader of all mankind, to do a number of things to discuss who Stalin is and what he was, okay? It was a cult of the personality, okay? Now, Stalin's cult of personality died with Stalin. Some people ask me, God kept calling the USSR Stalinist even to this day. But my argument is that Stalinism died with Stalin in the Soviet Union. So we have to look at, when we look at a cult of personality, we have to look at that as a sickness of socialism. There's nothing good about the cult of the personality, because it takes away any kind of possibility of a democratic way of working things, and it gives it all to the leader. It tends to give power to one leader, and that's not a good thing. You look at what happened in China with, Mao would say all the sparrows are killing our crops and eating our grain. They kill the sparrows, they end up with their grain being eaten by the insects, for instance. There's no one person who has all the knowledge to do all the things in the entire nation. It just doesn't happen. And that's just an unfortunate, realization that some people have to give themselves when they look at leaders. Leaders are fallible. This is my leader, but my leader is fallible. And we have to look at all leaders that way. Excuse me a minute. I have to take care of something here. Leaders are fallible, and you have to look at all leaders as being that way, even leaders that that we love. You know, we can certainly look at, say, Donald Trump and say Donald Trump was fallible. That's easy. That's easy, right? But is it easy to say that Lenin was a great leader, but Lenin was fallible? Of course Lenin was fallible. All leaders are fallible. No leader doesn't make mistakes. Just the way it is. So we have to look at North Korea as a state, a socialist state. Because it's not just socialist states that have cults of personality, but a socialist state, in the case of North Korea, that has a cult of personality. And that's a very harmful thing. Okay, second off, North Korea has a fake ideology called Juche. Juche was written by the Kim, the original Kim leader, as a way of breaking away from the Soviet Union and China's ideology. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying to yourself, well, this is Korea. You know, Korea has a unique history, has unique people, has a unique way of doing things, and that for that reason we're going to do things in a different way. But the Juche idea, the idea of self-reliance, doesn't work in North Korea, and it certainly doesn't work. Never really did work in North Korea. North Korea depended on the Soviet Union, China, for imports of such things, and this is very important as they go on, as such things as fertilizer. They need fertilizer to grow food. If they don't grow food, people starve. Okay, and North Korea or DPRK has depended on imports of grain in order to keep their people fed. You know, now we can go on further about the things North Koreans need to do to build a nuclear program, to keep their weapon systems going, to build roads, to build buildings, all this. I'm not going to go too much into that. I'm just saying that self-reliance is, and I'm going to use a very strong word here, so kiddies, please close your eyes. They depend on is total bullshit. They depend on others to survive. And that's nothing to be ashamed of or worried about. It does, I can understand the idea that you don't want to become a colonized nation, by depending on others too heavily. That is a danger, okay, and I do understand that. But this is taking things to an absolute extreme. The second problem they have, and I think in some ways this is even worse than the first one I mentioned, the Juche, is the idea of military first. One thing that broke the Soviet Union was spending way too much money on the military. I mean, it was something like 26% or even more of their total GNP, and that is untenable. I mean, our nation spends too much on it. We pay for it in many ways. Like our schools aren't good enough. We don't have enough medical care and all this. But ours isn't even that high. Okay. So what Korea is doing to itself is they're crushing their people economically with the military first, just like we are in this country, just like the USSR did in their country. Now, going back to the idea of the cult of personality, we have another huge problem. That's the deification. I mean, the honest to God deification of the first leader, who has become known as the I can't remember what it's called, the forever president. Basically, a dead man is running the country. A dead man. What the hell? You mean we look at that's an odd one. People will say, well, what about Jesus? I mean, but that's a deification, but it's not political. You can argue back and forth. We can argue back and forth whether or not Christianity is political. Obviously some Christians really get deep into politics and try to want to run a theocracy. in the United States and other areas. You know, there's no doubt about that. But the problem is that we're not talking about them. Okay, we're gonna stick to Korea, a socialist country, a country that depends on helping its people, on building the people, and making them better and stronger, and making them more educated, and making their medical things better, and really building a country that really can be a shining beacon for the rest of the world. You know, unfortunately, because they have a theocracy based on a dead man, on a man who died years ago, it just doesn't work. And plus that, then his own son becomes part of that theocracy, and his own grandson becomes part of that theocracy. And there's some talk that the granddaughter might become part of that theocracy. Socialism doesn't depend on theocracy. We can certainly allow people to engage in their own religions, engage in their own praise, engage in their own ideas of life and that. You want to go? I'll go first. You know, those are all things that are important. You know, but we shouldn't have a socialist country doing that. That makes no sense. You know, we don't. The idea of cult personality, the idea of military first, the idea of the deification of a past leader into a permanent president, all these things are harmful. Now, you know, I know that people might go to the capital city in North Korea and look at it and see how wonderful it is. And I've seen enough films in that to realize that, you know, the capital city's clean, the people are busy, it looks nice. But then they get outside of the capital city and they're told not to film people not to film the military, which is not an unusual request for any country, but also not to film the people. And you look at the people, and they're thin. They definitely have not. They're very small. It's not a Korean trait to be small. It's not like I'm in Chengdu, China, the Sichuan area, where people actually are pretty short. You know, but that's not because of malnutrition. It's just because they're short. You know, but that's not a Korean trait. So there's really, you know, gosh, there's, you know, you go to that country, given all these restrictions, don't take pictures of that, don't take pictures of this, and I think the polite thing to do and the right thing to do is to follow those rules. The reason I'm saying that is because those minders that you have are dependent upon their own livelihood for you to do that, and for you to obey these rules makes sense. And I get a little annoyed when I see U.S. A lot of the United States citizens making a game of it. You know, like, oh, this is going to be fun. I'm going to screw over the miners, and I'm going to show them who I am and what I'm doing. I'm going to be the one who shows the miners that, you know, by gosh, you can't tell me what to do. Well, that's just screwed up. Okay, and I'm not going to go into any kind of charade here about it, but I will tell you that when you don't obey the rules in Korea, it can be very serious for you. You know, especially if you're a U.S. citizen, because right now North Korea does not trust U.S. citizens, and I think for some good reasons they don't. You know, but even so. I would think that our mission, being tourists in North Korea, is to give a good example of what United States citizens are like. And when we argue with them, when we tell them that their arguments are wrong, that North Korea attacked first, you know, it doesn't matter what your history is, it doesn't matter what you know is better than they or that. This is what they're told to say. Okay, they're not being told to say, I'm going to be the person who will be different than all the other miners. I'll agree with you. It's not going to happen. It doesn't help to argue. You know, I never understood that anyway, because you know you're being there. I've always been told you're the ambassador to these countries, and being an ambassador means that you're going to be polite. You're going to ask questions, which is fine, and to listen to what they say, and whether or not you believe it. I would just politely say, well, thank you for the answer. Anyway, going back to this. As a socialist, I don't even want to go into things like do they print counterfeit money? Do they make and export drugs? There's a number of things that have been said about North Korea that I just can't substantiate, and I really don't have time to substantiate. I can't substantiate that people are starving. I can't substantiate that people are not allowed to leave North Korea. I can certainly substantiate that that people are not being given enough medicine. They're not, there's a number of things you can substantiate, okay? And all these things are things that you can say, well, this is because of the embargo in North Korea. I don't quite buy that because Cuba manages to feed his people. Cuba manages to get medicine to his people and do good health care. Okay, and they're under an embargo. They've been embargo a lot longer than North Korea. Well, maybe not longer, but they have been under embargo for quite a while. And so to say that North Korea is somehow embattled, I can say, yeah, I think in some ways they are. There's a real need for us in this country to try to approach them in a way that they can accept in order to try to cool off the situation. But as long as the Kim family is involved in the running of that country, and as long as being the head of that country means that you get to live high in the hog while everyone starves, you're not going to get a country who democratically decides that, hey, enough is enough. We got to do something. We want to keep our nuclear weapons, because we don't trust what the United States is up to, which is certainly within reasonable thinking when you think of the DMZ and how heavily armed it is on both sides. But you have to also say, as you're a Korean, my people are starving. My people need medicine. And someone may even go further and say, my people are oppressed. My people are being thrown in jails when they shouldn't have to be. We need to somehow open up things enough so that we can have a democratic society without breaking apart like the Soviet Union did, or the Eastern European countries did. We have to figure out a way of doing this without destroying ourselves, because ultimately they could end up destroying themselves. I want to see North Korea to be a socialist country. I know that's a pretty brave thing to say, but I also want North Korea to be a country that's reasonable towards its people, and I don't think it's being reasonable towards its people right now. I think they need to be reasonable, and how they do that is going to be a challenge that once they want to face it, they can do it. In the meantime, my feeling also is hands off North Korea. We can certainly talk to them. We can certainly try to help them with things. They need help with farming. They need help with food. They need help with medicine. If there's any way we can do that, I think we should do it. This idea of that let them starve, doesn't help us any. Let them be sick. That doesn't help us any. None of those things help us. What would help us is us being reasonable ourselves about how to deal with North Korea. And I know it's going to be, I know it's a long road. I don't think there's anything that's going to happen overnight. We can certainly hope for that. But as a socialist, I want them to remain socialist. I just want them to be a more reasonable country.